with a built-in shock absorber. It's tough, so tough, this G-Shock can take a slap in the face and not even flinch.
The Casio G-Shock is a cult classic watch. It's been introduced in the early 1980s, and since then, it's been sold over 100 million times, making it one of the most popular watch line in history. No matter which G-Shock you get, you're certain to have a sturdy wristwatch with tons of functions and high water resistance. But will the DW6900 model live up to the expectations? Let's look into that. As always, I'll kick off the video by looking at the measurements of the watch. As you can see here on my 6¼ inch wrist, it looks humongous, which explains why I don't really wear this watch anymore. I instead bought this DW5600, which is much more suited for smaller wrists. But for you guys with big wrists, let's say 6¾ inches and above, it will be perfect. It is a G-Shock, so you will get their signature resin case and band with this nice square decal here. As the name implies, it is extremely resistant to shocks. You can drop this one from pretty much any heights and it will keep on running just fine, but it might show a bit of wear and tear. As you can see here, I've put a pretty big white scratch on the case within the first few months of owning this G-Shock. So of course it still runs perfectly fine, but I've always heard before that G-Shock watches are indestructible, which is true. It will keep on running even if you take it through hell, but it will not look brand new throughout its whole life. So you need to take this into consideration. As is the case for any other G-Shock watch, you get 200 meters of water resistance. As you can see here, 20 bar water resistance. This means you could take this one for recreational diving. I haven't tested this out because I don't dive at all, but I think it's always reassuring to know that you have a very high water resistance on your watch. We are now going to go through the features of this DW6900. I'm kind of going to skim through them because in the description below there will be a link for the full 20-minute review of this watch, in which I go in depth into all of these features. So if you want that, you can click below. I will also put the instructions manual, which will give you this information too. But for now, we're just going to go explain lightly what each and every one of them do. So the first one is the timekeeping feature. Pretty simple. You will get the date, as well as the clock. This one can be set to either 24 or 12 hour setting, depending on what you prefer. You also get 3 sub-dials up here. The first 2 are seconds counter, and then the last bigger sub-dial will count every 10 seconds. So pretty cool looking. I think the sub-dials kind of add a bit of life to the dial, so I like them very much. The next feature is the alarm feature. Pretty simple. You can either set it to the daily alarm, which will sound at the same time every day for the whole year. You also get the monthly alarm, which will sound once a month, every month for the whole year. You will get the yearly alarm, which will sound once a year at the given date and time. And finally, the 1 month alarm, which will sound at the same time every day for a whole month, then stop for the rest of the year. The third function is the stopwatch. This is the countdown timer. This one can be set from 1 second to 24 hours. It will count down to 0, and once it reaches 0, it will sound the alarm. You also get the auto repeat mode, which will just start over again once it reaches 0. So let's say I put it to a 30-second countdown. It will go down to 0 and then start over again until I make it stop. Now the fourth and final feature is the stopwatch. Pretty simple feature once again. This one can be set up to 24 hours with 1/100th of a second accuracy. You get the split times function, which is kind of helpful if you want to calculate how much time you took for different laps. Let's say you've got 5 laps, you'll be able to see how much time you took for every lap. And you also have the first and second place function, which is used to tell the time at which the first runner arrived and then the second runner arrived. Once again, if you want to know more about these features, go in the description below. You will get either my 20-minute review or the instructions manual for this watch, which will help you with these features. You also get the electroluminescent backlight when you press the big G logo here. Don't know if we'll be able to see it. Yep. So very bright, very durable. You'll never have any problem reading time in a darker setting with this one. And you can also set it that it will flash. Let's say you've put an alarm. When your alarm will ring, you can set it so that this backlight will also flash. So pretty neat. For this DW6900 model, Casio says it will have a 2 years battery life. They say it will have 2 years if you use, I think, 4 seconds of the backlight every day, as well as a few features like stopwatch or something like that. But for a person like me that barely use the backlight, doesn't really use the stopwatch or anything like that either, I've owned this watch for upwards of 6 years. And I've just changed the battery now before making this video because I wanted to make sure it was bright enough, but it still worked just fine. So if you don't use that many features, it will last for upwards of 7, maybe even 8 years. But as soon as you start using the backlight and the features, it will drop down to, let's say, 2 years minimum. So a pretty good battery life overall. To conclude the video, I'm now going to give a few pros and cons of this DW6900 G-Shock. The first one is that it is sturdy as hell. As I've said earlier, you can pretty much beat it up and it will keep on working without a problem. So very useful if you're kind of a clumsy person that knocks his watch everywhere. It will stay working over several decades maybe. So very good. Also, the next pro is that it has a lot of functions. As I've said, go watch my video below. You will get a nice idea of everything you can do with this watch. It also has a great bulky styling. As I've said earlier in this video, it is not for me because I have a smaller wrist, but if you're someone with bigger wrists, it will look very good on you. And the final pro is that it is incredibly affordable for what it offers. I've bought this one for under $100, and for something that will last decades with all these functions, I think it's just a really good bargain. Now for the cons, the first one is that it does show wear and tear quite early in my case. As I've said, within the first couple months, I've got this scratch. So it was a bit disappointing at first. The next con is the hard to read font. As you can see here, these fonts are kind of black on black. Easy to read now because I have a good lighting, but under normal or darker lighting, it will be very hard to read. Same thing for the inner dial here. You get small, at least these fonts are white, but they're very small. So if you don't have the best eyes, you might have a bit of trouble reading them. So kind of nitpicking, but I have to give a few cons. And the last but not least con is that you cannot take the sound off. Every time you press a button or you set something up, it will make this small beep sound. I'm wearing this watch at my office, and we're kind of in an open space office. So sometimes, let's say I'll try to set my stopwatch for my lunchtime, something like that, and I'll just go through the functions. and I'll get these weird looks from my coworkers because it's kind of loud. So I would have loved to be able to remove this sound, but unfortunately you cannot do that. So that's my last con. I've got nothing much more to add. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I would appreciate it if you want to leave a comment or maybe even share this video with a friend. So thanks, and have a nice day.